If you're in the market for a PC, but you can't really afford a new PC, there are a few ways around that. For one, I did make a video that does cover a $300 mystery build that actually turned out to be a Steam machine where you would wipe Linux off of it, add a Windows OS, and pretty much have a working computer that was small, compact, and would work well for most gaming as long as you didn't want to push brand new AAA titles. But there are a few other ways around that, and today we're going to address exactly what that entails. So here is the machine that is in question. So for around $300, this one was just a little bit above that, but for around $300, you can build a machine that's probably pretty comparable to this one. Now, what you have to do to actually get that to work that way is you need to go to two places. You need to go to Craigslist and search around Craigslist and see if you can find deals that way, or eBay. Both are very good options. eBay might have a little more selection if you're not from a bigger city. That can be more difficult on Craigslist. That's the case for me. There's a little bit of options where I live and what's around me, but not as many, at least at prices I was willing to pay. So that is something you must be very, very careful with. And usually too, if you run to somebody on Craigslist who does have a decent deal, but they're asking too much, you can always try to refer them to eBay saying, hey, on eBay it's $20 cheaper. You know, just try to get people to work with you that way. Because I think some people do realize they're asking too much and they're really hoping they'll get more money than what a certain part is worth. So those are the two places you're going to want to look. We'll go over what's inside this machine, how much we paid essentially for these parts inside, and how much you can kind of look to see how much they're going to go for now, at least on eBay. We're going to pull them up that way because that's just easier than searching every Craigslist offer ever. So inside this machine, we have let's start off with the motherboard. That is the Asus M597 or M5A97R2.0, I believe is the exact board number. It's actually a pretty good board. It still sells new nowadays for about $70, but you can find them used for about $30 to $35, which really isn't too bad. If you keep your eyes open, maybe you can find a super deal and get one for below that, but that would be maybe a little bit difficult. So that's the board we have. On that board, we have the AMD FX 6100 processor, actually still a pretty good budget performance processor to this day. It sells for new-ish, around $80-ish, but we were able to find one for around $35 once again. Processors I've seen go for high amounts that they shouldn't, or if you find somebody who knows it's not worth a ton because it's actually getting a little bit older, but it's still a good processor, you can get them for cheaper. So you have to look, you have to dig a little bit more. Also we have is two 4 gig sticks of Corsair Vengeance RAM. So 8 gigs in total, running at 1333. Pretty good, not bad, definitely gonna be enough. 8 gigs is where you want to start things off if you want to do some gaming on your rig. So we're going to be good there. Those will run you around $25 if you can find a deal. But other than that, about $30 to $35 when you're finding some used ones. As for the power supply, I actually got a hell of a deal on a Corsair CX600M. Really, really good. Typically, a used one of those is going to cost way more than what I was able to find one for, so don't worry about being able to find the specific model. Just look around for something that maybe isn't modular at all. You'll save some money there, and probably can find a power supply for anywhere, honestly, from $20 to $30, depending on what kind you can find. But you don't really need too much when it comes to plugs on it because you're not really running anything crazy in this machine. You don't need tons of extra devices for extra plugs, and just kind of a base standard with, as long as you have enough power, you're going to be good. 600 is probably a little overkill for this build anyways. But we got a deal on it, so we don't need to worry about that. And then we have a 1 terabyte Seagate drive in it, which hopefully if you're building from something else like an even older machine, hopefully you can bring your hard drive over, save money entirely there. But if you have to go find a used one of these, or not even a used one, but like a new one on eBay, $40 is what it's probably going to run you for a 1 terabyte. You could always go with something smaller. You're not going to be able to squeeze in an SSD in this build. They're just too expensive to stay in this budget range. So that's one thing just to be aware of if you're looking to do something like this and finding some used parts and putting them together. The other thing that you're going to want to pick up is a video card, and for that we decided to go with something new because we couldn't find anything we wanted specifically in the price range that we wanted. So we picked up the MSI GTX 1050 Ti with 4 gigabytes of on-board video RAM, which is good. It's going to play titles at a pretty good rate. The other nice thing too about it is it's a little bit newer, so we have, as much as we have the HDMI and we have the DVI, we also do have a display port for future, which is pretty good because if you were to go out and buy something maybe comparable, let's say you went out and you found a 6870 or a R9 280 or 270. I don't think you're going to find a 290 for that price yet. But if you found something like that, it might not have all the I/O that you want. It's also a little bit older. This is going to work pretty well, honestly. Comparable to this, you could go out and find a GTX 950 or 960. But once again, we just went with the 1050 Ti because it's going to work pretty well in the future, and it's a pretty good card. We're going to go over benchmark numbers in just a second. So that was the one thing we bought that was new. And that was about $150 because it is a new card. And that's the one thing that's really going to be giving you the performance that you need for gaming. You don't really have to worry about all the other stuff as much as the video card. So make sure you don't skimp out there. So that's about half of our budget right there. Case, actually found this case off a friend for pretty cheap. You can get a case such as this. It's just a pretty basic Antec case. A used one, man, you might be able to find for as low as 15 bucks, to be honest. Even a new one, on sale I saw for $20. But a new one, like just a base standard Antec case or most others, are gonna run you at just under $30. So really not too much for a case. So a little bit over $300 for your overall price for this specific build. This one also is in blue, if you may have noticed. They come in black, but this one is actually, I built this for a friend, for his son for his birthday. We decided to actually paint this one, so I decided to buy $5 worth of paint and take everything apart and paint it fairly well. Just to give it a little bit different look, we decided to go with like a midnighty blue. And this case actually came with these blue case fans, so that was awesome. So we're good to go with kind of matching there. So you got two in the front, one up top, and actually one in the back. So this case actually came with 4 fans. So just the fans alone were worth the case that came with it. So you can get all this and the performance with all of this for around $300 if you're willing to do the work and look for those on Craigslist and on eBay. You can find these things for those prices. Don't be afraid to look a little more or try to barter with people. And also, around this time of year, people might be getting new PCs for the holidays, and they might be looking to sell their old hardware on the cheap at the beginning of the year. So that's something to look out for. And there's always deals going on. You never know when people are gonna list something. So some of this stuff, it may seem a little bit older, but it really isn't like slow or bad by any means. Now, to get into that a little bit more, let's go over the benchmark numbers and see how everything performed in actual games. Now, getting into our game tests, we decided to start things off with Dirt Rally, and all of our tests will be running at 1080p resolution because that's what this card's really meant for, and that's what this build's meant for. We're not going to push anything crazy to different resolutions. First off, we had that with it on medium and on high with 2 times MSAA. We had 67 FPS on medium and 65 FPS on high, so really actually not too much of a performance gash from it going to high, which is good. We want to be at least 60 FPSs in these games to have smooth numbers. And that's what we got. So that's a really good score for Dirt Rally, which is a pretty game, you could say. Next, we ran Rise of the Tomb Raider. We ran it on medium, and we ran it on high with FXAA. On medium, it ran at 62 FPS, so we got that 60 FPS number that we were looking at. And then on high, it was 10 lower at 52, which really isn't terrible by any means. But, you know, it starts to, dip down a little bit because it is harder. Although, to be honest, I don't think Rise of the Tomb Raider is a perfectly optimized game. So that's one other thing to note just in general for that game. The next title we ran was Grand Theft Auto 5, which is, as we know, a pretty hardcore game. On high, with no settings besides just the FXAA, we had 62 FPS. And then when we took it to high with MSAA turned on at ×4, we averaged 56 FPS, which is right below 60, but really not too bad, and that MSAA makes it pretty. I think you can even turn it down to just ×2, and that would probably just clean it up a little bit too, and probably have a little bit better FPS rate as well. And then for our final test, we went over to Overwatch, which is not as demanding as these other games, and is more of an esports title, but probably the hardest to play esports title, at least when it comes to graphics. And it ran at 77 FPS on Ultra. And Ultra isn't the highest setting in Overwatch. There's an epic setting as well. But Ultra looks amazing. Honestly, the game looks great on high, so it doesn't really matter. But 77 FPS on Ultra for Overwatch, pretty good. So if you're looking to play any other esports titles, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, really anything like that, you're going to be in a good spot. This will definitely conquer all of those games easily with probably hundreds of FPS for games like League of Legends and Dota and so on. So nothing to worry about for those. You'll have a great machine that can play all of them incredibly well. So really, with those numbers, not too bad, you could say. If we were just to compare this straight across the board to just your basic Xbox One or PlayStation 4, those games, well, they don't always run at 1080p, as we know, and they don't always run at anything more than 30 FPS. So realistically, this kind of outperforms that pretty well. It's also a PC, so it just does more overall because PC. but it's pretty good if you're looking to do something that splices in either used parts all across the board or mostly used parts, and then finding yourself a video card that can fit in nicely and you can pair that across. So with a little bit of room of future upgrading and parts that you could in theory use across to a new build. That power supply across to a new build, it's going to work just fine. Some of the other stuff won't. You could definitely pull your hard drive across. You could definitely pull your video card across too at first if you just wanted to get onto DDR4 with a new motherboard and maybe a little beefier processor. But really, this is not bad. If you know a little bit about that processor, it's honestly pretty good for games without really pushing certain titles. So that's the build. Now, there's one thing you could do to save a little bit of money, maybe $50 to $100. You could find a graphics card that has a little bit of power from the old days, maybe not as much as that 1050 Ti, but something maybe like this. Maybe you could find a 680 or a 6870 for maybe 75 bucks. You could save a little bit there if you can find somebody unloading one of these. This one's not in that build because this one's broken. But before this broke, that was my fault, whoops. Before this got fried, this I was doing just some normal tests with for kicks, and it worked really, really well on Overwatch at like high settings, and it was pretty silky smooth. So this will handle all your esports titles. This won't hold up long term though to your AAA titles because it only has 2 gigabytes of onboard video RAM. So that's something that it would not hold up for the long term. But if you could find something like this, this could work. Maybe find a 7870, which I believe is essentially what is inside both of the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. So something like that could work very, very well if you could find one on the cheap. But besides that, you might have a hard time without going out and buying a newer video card. But if you can source all the other parts that are in this build or something similar, you can put yourself in a good spot overall for sure. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about this build. If you think it's pretty good, if you think those numbers that it clocked out for those games is respectable or not. Interested to know what you think, or if I would disagree with what you think, because I like to do that too sometimes. I can be snarky in the comments too. They're not just your comments, they're mine too. But overall, let me know what you think about that, and let me know what you would like to see on the channel in the future when it comes to PCs. Would you like to see some actual builds of a certain price point? You want to see more part lists? You want to see more just build ideas or custom stuff done to builds? Let me know. I'd be interested to see what you guys would like to view. Other than that, I'll just see all of you guys in the next video.